Looking through his telescope was a pleasure which the emperor often gave himself during the course of the day, and he forgot nothing which could make him a spectator of what went on around him, so that he had the branches which might obstruct his view cut away. If the governor's aides were at Longwood and they were outside of the space covered by his telescope, he would send one of his valets to find out what had become of them and what road they had taken. One day, when the emperor was in the reception room with Madame de Montsalon, he looked through his telescope and saw a number of people who had stopped outside the boundary. They were Monsieur and Madame Sturmer, Monsieur de Montigny, perhaps the Russian commissioner, Monsieur Balmain, Madame Bertrand, accompanied by Monsieur de Montsalon, or the Grand Marshal went to meet them. He said to Madame de Montsalon, "Go and join them, Madame." "But sire must go and dress." "You are all right," replied the emperor impatiently. "Go." Madame de Montsalon left the room, but instead of going toward the party, she turned towards her quarters. The emperor, displeased at not seeing her, said to someone who stood by him at the moment, "Madame de Montsalon is always well enough dressed to come and see me, but never handsome enough to see anyone else." In a moment of irritation, the emperor wished to dress or undress or needed something. He was angry with Marchand and me. I don't remember why. And he said to Marchand, "Since you are not willing to wait on me, send me Gentilini. He will wait on me." I do not recollect what happened next, but it all ended like the others, whether on one side or the other. There were a few hours of sulkiness, after which the emperor came back to his habitual good humor, and we went on with our service for him as if nothing had happened. Chapter 11, the Emperor's Day. As I did not keep a journal at St. Helena any more than I had done previously, I shall confine myself to describing things as I have done heretofore, and as my memory has retained them, having no work or date which can serve me as a guide. I shall place the separate articles almost at random. When the Emperor lived at the Briars, he dressed in the uniform of the Master Chasseurs of the Guard. He had worn that costume on board of the Bellerophon and the Northumberland, with, of course, the three-cornered hat and the tricolored cockade. He stopped wearing this cockade later. Shortly after he moved in the Longwood, he wore a shooting coat at first, and when this, after having been turned, became really too bad, he wore in its place a civilian's coat, green or brown. I do not recollect which. These three coats were cut on the same pattern. When he dressed, he always wore the grand ribbon of the Legion of Honor. The ribbon was without a cross and worn under the coat, and the star on the coat. Whether in the military or civilian dress, he wore a waistcoat piqué or white kerseymere with the little figured pockets and short breeches of kerseymere with flapping pockets. He never wore anything but silk stockings having a crown in the corner and gold buckles on his shoes. These were round and ornamented with little roses. The knee buckles were also of gold with little designs and were somewhat longer than broad. He always wore a muslin cravat and a collar black silk folded, which was buckled behind a square, narrow gold buckle. In incognito, he wore a green frock coat and a round hat. When the emperor superintended the work in his gardens, he wore a hunting waistcoat and nankeen pantaloons with feet and a broad-brimmed straw hat with a narrow black ribbon and red or green slippers on his feet. He usually had in his hand a little rosewood billiard cue, which served him both for a stick and a measure. In his room, he wore a frock coat of piqué as a dressing gown, pantaloons of white fustian or swan skin with feet, and a madras handkerchief on his head. Except when he went into the gardens, he dressed in this way part of the day. He was comfortable in it. If he went to walk in the gardens during the morning, which happened to tell the truth every day, he wore nothing else. For the first 4 years, he dressed every day unless he felt indisposed. It was usually about 3 that he dressed. He only shaved every 2 or 3 days. When he was dressed before leaving his room, he put in the pockets of his coat handkerchief and a snuff box, a little opera glass, and a tortoiseshell bonbonniere in which were licorice. Sometimes, if he had a cold, jujube paste, but never anything else. He never wore gloves unless he were going out on horseback, and then he was more likely to put them in his pocket than on his hands. The emperor never wore any jewelry except a watch, with which there was a chain of the Empress Marie Louise's hair. On this was a gold key and a little seal of the same metal, on which was engraved an N with a crown. In the center of the underside of the watch was engraved a small B. During the last year of his exile, the Napoleon exchanged this watch for the Grand Marshal's. When he placed it in his hands, he said, "This one marked the hour of my battles." The emperor had several snuff boxes which he used habitually. They were of tortoiseshell lined with gold, and on the cover of each was an antique medal, Greek or Roman, of silver set in a circle of gold. One of these snuff boxes had on the lower part of the opening a little gold medal of Napoleon. The form of some of these snuff boxes was oval, others were square. These last were longer than broad, with the corners cut off. There were also two others, a tortoiseshell lined with gold. On one was a portrait of the Empress, and the other a naked child who was the King of Rome. At first he used these snuff boxes like the others, but afterwards he had them put aside in a box which was called the snuff box case. The emperor had still other snuff boxes with medals, paintings, and cameos. The handsomest was square and ornamented with an antique cameo of Alexander the Great. There was another round and rather large, but of ordinary workmanship, ornamented with two large medals of gold. Above was Francis I, and beneath Charles V. The emperor was of exemplary sobriety, brought up in the ordinary classes of society. He had preserved in his greatness the habits of his youth. The simplest dishes were those which suited him best. He was indeed extremely particular. The slightest breach of cleanliness or badly set table aroused his disgust. He preferred a good soup. He liked it very hot, and a good piece of boiled beef to all the complicated and succulent dishes which his cooks could make for him. Boiled or poached eggs, an omelet, a small leg of mutton, a cutlet, fillet of beef, broiled breast of lamb or a chicken wing, lentils, beans, and a salad were the dishes which they habitually served at his breakfasts. There were never more than two dishes on the table for this meal, one of vegetables preceded by a soup,